الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا. سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى إلى المسجد لتفسدن في الأرض مرتين ولتعلن علوا كبيرا. فإذا جاء وعد أولاهما بعثنا عليكم عبادا لنا أولي بأس مفعولا ثم رددنا لكم الكرة عليهم وأمددناكم بأموال وبنين وجعلناكم أكثر نفيرا. إن أحسنتم لأنفسكم وإن أسأتم فلها. فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة ليسوءوا وجوهكم وليدخلوا المسجد كما دخلوه أول مرة وليتبروا ما علوا تتبيرا. عسى ربكم أن يرحمكم وإن عدتم عدنا وجعلنا جهنم للكافرين حصيرا. صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah, Imam Ibrahim. Now I would like to introduce our next brother who will be speaking, Ibrahim Antar. He has been the president of ICW since 2019, and under his leadership, the masjid has been renovated and our programs has been greatly improved. So please join me as we welcome Brother Ibrahim Antar.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi.
One more time, thank you. Today is the we officially declare the era of after COVID-19. So you remember we missed you for a long time, almost a year and a half. We didn't gather like we're gathering today because of COVID. Social distancing, mask, temperature taken, all that kind of stuff kind of kept us away. Even last year, Ramadan, you know, we have a really hard time. And this year, we had Ramadan, but with a little restriction. Today is officially, we kick off that gathering at ICW again, and is a special event for the monthly potluck. So this is not just one event and it's over. We're gonna have you here, inshallah, with more of your friend and relative and family to come here on a monthly basis, listen to a good advice, lectures, have children meet other children, sister meet other sister, and brother meet our brothers. This is what Islam is jama'ah, to get together and communicate and enjoy each other's here. And one of the event, you know, brother Talha, mashallah, he's the chairman of the program committee. We thought about how we're going to do it. I mean, what is the best way to do it? And then we choose one topic is dear to all Muslim, and that topic is Palestine. And now, you know, a lot of voices talk about Palestine, but we need a credible, scholarly opinion about Palestine. We couldn't find anyone better than Brother Dr. Bazian. He's coming especially from California. He's on a tour here in the Midwest. He just came from Michigan. His airplane was delayed for a couple of hours, but he's here with us today. And if you want to learn about the issue of Palestine, and he is the right person. You're in the right place, and he is the right guy. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. And ICW will promise you, as always, we'll keep the good things coming. I mean, we're very excited to have you here, and you will not be disappointed. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much, and welcome to ICW. Assalamu alaikum.
As Brother Anthar had just said, Palestine is a very big, hot issue right now. Our hearts were with our Muslim brothers and sisters as we saw last Eid what happened in the last days of Ramadan. And the world was silent, but we were not. We spoke loudly through our du'as. We asked Allah for help. And before we continue this lecture, I would ask all of you too, as you are listening, I recommend thinking about questions, because this is a very important issue that we all should be educated on. So as our brother here continues to lecture us and teach us on in a scholarly manner, I would want you to think about questions, and we're actually, inshallah, going to pass around the papers so that every one of you can have an opportunity to ask questions on this very important matter. So I encourage you to do that. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our esteemed guest. This professor, Hatem Bazian, has been a very important person leading the research on Palestine. He has published books, he has taught classes, he has done a lot of work on this issue of Palestine. So, without further ado, I will introduce him, Professor Hatem Bazian.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa salatu wa salamu ala khair al-mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. First, thank you both Sheikh Ibrahim as well as Brother Ibrahim for the introduction and also for the invitation to be the first lecture coming back from COVID. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless us with shifa and to really make it possible for those who have suffered or lost someone we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to really raise them high in abode in paradise and make it possible for all of us to continue to have the protection from Allah. So today I wanted to really delve into Palestine to understand both the history of what we are facing, and more importantly, what we need to do in order to change the dynamics relative to Palestine, but more importantly here for us in the United States. Now, if we think about Palestine as a colonial project, because Palestine is the last colonial project to be commissioned in the 20th century. So often people wrongly approach Palestine from a variety of lenses. And the only lens that we need to actually think about is Palestine is facing and continue to face a settler colonial project. Now, the fact that Zionism, that was initiated by Western and Jewish population in Europe that was facing anti-Semitism, they approached addressing Now, Herzl's view of the anti-Semitism in Europe, it's a real problem. And it's been persistent in Europe for quite some time. Let me say that Muslims often don't understand that the history of anti-Semitism in Europe also mirror the history of Islamophobia or anti-Muslim discourses in Europe. Remember, 1492, both Muslims and Jews were expelled from Spain. And the idea of what a European is came about as a result of a European is a white Christian that did not mix with Muslims and Jews. Okay, that is the definition that gets to be developed around 1492. So Herzl, in thinking about and framing the problem of anti-Semitism, identifying anti-Semitism was correct. The solution is actually embracing European colonization, which is the fundamental question and error that we continue to face from this project. So Europe's anti-Semitism have to be understood. In anti-Semitism, as it relates to how it was framed, it says, for the living, the Jew is a dead man. For the native, an alien and a vagrant. For property holders, a beggar. For the poor, an exploiter and a millionaire. For patriots, a man without a country. For all classes, a hated rival. A people without a territory is like a man without a shadow, something unnatural, spectral. Now you need to understand that this was also framed as a land without a people for a people without a land later on as it relates to the Palestinians. So anti-Semitism is a real problem in Europe, but it was imported and being placed in relations to Palestine and continues to be the case. So political Zionism. Zionism is a movement originally for the re-establishment and now the development of a Jewish nation in what is now Israel or Palestine. The first idea of creating a Jewish state in Palestine did not originate with the Jewish people. When Napoleon came to Egypt with the French colonial project in 1797, he appealed to the Jewish population to join the French enterprise, thinking that if he gets the Jews to support him, then he would actually usher in a Christian era relative to the reconstituting of Israel as a precondition or a stepping stone for the return of Jesus, for the return of the Messiah. This idea was picked up by Great Britain around 1865. And the British funded at the time an exploration, archaeological exploration of Palestine to try to relocate the biblical narrative. So Zionism, in essence, is a late arrival or a partnership that begins with Napoleon, develops into Great Britain 1865 onward, And then the British embrace this project out of their own colonial interest, not because they loved the Jews, nor they were looking at hating the Muslims. They were looking at it from an economic perspective to try to secure their trade, and I will get to this point later on. Now, I said that Herzl himself understood the problem or understood the project as being something colonial. This is very, very important because modern Zionists these days, especially for people who engage in interfaith dialogue, that the Jewish person that comes in there, Jewish Zionist person, says that they need to understand our feeling toward Israel, that this is a country that we have relation, and as soon as you begin to mention colonization, apartheid, human rights violation, basically it ends the conversation because at least they don't want to admit the history of how Zionism was a colonial project from its onset. How we understand it is Great Britain issued the Balfour Declaration, right? And with the Balfour Declaration, one nation solemnly promised a second nation the country of a third. All right, so Great Britain promised the Jewish Zionist population the land of Palestine at a time where the British did not actually have control over Palestine, the Balfour Declaration. So, and I will get into a little bit more in the Balfour Declaration to understand the dynamics of it. The Balfour Declaration, there was a period of pre-declaration discussions. There was interest that brought the Balfour Declaration into fruition. There were actually 6 different drafts. It wasn't only just one draft and it was issued. It was actually 6 different drafts for it. And it was adopted into the League of Nations, which is post-World War I. The League of Nations was set up as a way to a cleaner version. You know how you have these, what you call clean and improved shampoo? It's a clean and improved colonization. So the European countries still were colonizing the world. And instead of saying we're colonial powers, we're right now mandate powers. We're going to help the natives arrive at ruling themselves. But all intensive purposes, it was a colonial enterprise sanctioned by the new international system. So it actually, the consequences of the declaration, for the first time, a public document entered into the body of international law that authorized the taking over of Palestinian land. Right? So again, the Balfour Declaration is still as an important document. It's 68 words of colonial dispossession. That's what the Balfour Declaration is about. Right? So in 68 words, the British managed to dispossess the Palestinians of their land. Now, we often think that words don't matter, right? Words do matter. And especially if we're talking about colonial words. If you don't think words don't matter, just think about weapons of mass destruction, which was used as a way to invade Iraq and destroy a country. And we're still unable to extricate ourselves from a conflict that possibly have killed over 1.5 million of Iraqis since 2003. And it was all on a bogus weapons of mass destruction. So words matter. 68 words of the Balfour Declaration, we are still dealing with the consequences of these 68 words. The 68 words came in through the age of colonization. If you lived in the world in 1914, all right, so 1914, the beginning of World War I, 85% of the known world surface was a colony. So if you're in the Indian subcontinent, your experience of the world came through your colonial experience with the British. If you're in the Congo, your world experience came through the Belgian colonization. If you're in North Africa, if you're in Algeria, if you're in Tunisia, if you're Senegal, Mali, your experience colonization of the French. So 85% of the known world surface was a colony. Europe's colonization project informed Zionism. Europe's colonial program informed Zionism. So Zionists at the time in 1914, at the time of striking a partnership with Great Britain, And I always say, alhamdulillah, it's no longer great because only Allah is great. Right? Because at a certain point they used to say that the British Empire, the sun never sat on the British Empire. Right? And there is a joke in this that God did not trust them in the dark. Right? But now, much of the British Empire have been liberated from the British, and some of their remaining items still are subject right now. People want to have independence. But that's how Zionism came within the colonial structure of Europe, and it joined as a junior partner. Indigenous population had no standing. Indigenous populations had no standing. You were subhuman. You were not considered to be human. Not only Palestinians, again, what I'm saying, when we talk about colonization, there are many, when you talk to Zionists, they want to make Palestine, and the issue of Palestine is complex. Right? For me, fuzzy math is complex. Right? Physics and nuclear physics and nuclear engineering is complex. There is nothing complex with colonization and destruction and genocide of indigenous population. There's nothing complex. It's actually so normal to read it, but they try to make it complex so you don't actually engage in the discussion, the conversation, and you don't confront it. Indigenous populations in the colonial projects were put to genocide. That's a main feature of colonization. For those who are, again, I see mixed crowd. If you're from the Indian subcontinent, the famine that came and was nurtured by Great Britain that killed, some say 6 million, some 7, some actually go even greater. And it was actually a famine that was produced because Great Britain took all the wheat, the rice, and took it out of the country, so resulted in the famine upon the population. Belgium killed 7 million in the Congo. Right, through the Belgian colonial enterprise. And then we don't want to talk about the United States. 20 million native populations were completely put to genocide. So colonization and genocide go on. So Palestinians have been facing genocide since 1917 when the British arrived, and continue to experience this at this particular time. Right, so we need to understand genocide and the indigenous population had no standing and continue to face this, the travesty of colonization. Now, Zionism accepted the Balfour Declaration as a stepping stone, that you had nothing, and all of a sudden, Great Britain promises you a whole land and a whole territory. So, from Herzl, he says, let the sovereignty be granted us over a portion of the globe, large enough to satisfy the rightful requirement of a nation. The rest we shall manage for ourselves. And so again, they saw the Balfour Declaration as putting a stepping stone, and the rest is here, a land without a people for a people without a land. And so we could see the progression from the period of early 1900 all the way up to the current period. And even the current period, the map is still shrinking as we speak. Right? It's the nature of settler colonialism to take maximum land and minimum population to make sure that the population are ethnically cleansed from the land. So we need to differentiate between settler colonialism and motherland colonialism satellites. The British had motherland satellites. They needed the indigenous population or the native population as labor force, and they needed the population for markets for their finished products. Settler colonialism does not need the indigenous population because they come to replace the indigenous population. So in settler colonial projects, you have genocide and transfer. Genocide and transfer. Again, we know here in the United States, native populations were committed to genocide and the remaining population transferred to the reservations. Palestinians were committed to a form of genocide, ethnic cleansing in 1948. The remaining population or whatever, they are in refugee camps. So you need to speak reservations, Native Americans, refugee camps, Palestinians. The process is identical in terms of settler colonialism. Right? Maximum land and eliminating the population. And then you get a land without a people for a people without a land, because again, the land has been cleansed, ethnic cleansing. And I recommend for people both to read Noor Masalha's book on the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, as well as Ilan Pape. Both are great works to give you the sense of what happened. So again, the Balfour Declaration were six drafts before the final text. And the American actually participated in the drafts, American Jewish population. So they were engaged in the draft. The final text was adopted on October 31st, 1917. Here's a question. When did Great Britain arrive in Palestine? When did actually occupy Palestine? That's when the Balfour Declaration was officially issued. When did Great Britain took over Palestine? Back there? No? December 10th, 1917. So the Balfour Declaration was issued before a country had control of a land. And again, anybody that studies law, if you don't have possession of a territory, you cannot actually dispossess or allocate or assign this country to anyone. And also, an occupying power does not have the right to the land. So the Balfour Declaration from Palestinian perspective is null and void, but it was empowered by being incorporated into all types of international legal structures. So the surrender of Palestine was December 10th, 1917. Some say December 11th, where it was handed to the Allenby, the General Allenby of the British, and moved in and took over Jerusalem. And that began the British occupation of Palestine. The declaration of the establishment of the State of Israel mentions the Balfour Declaration. It says that this right was recognized in the Balfour Declaration. So a fictitious document was used to authenticate the Declaration of Independence of a state. So we say that words don't matter. No, words actually matter in this sense, that a fictitious document, right, with the British, used as a way to frame the declaration for the establishment of the State of Israel on November 2nd, 1917. Now, on a regular basis, annually, we have the Day of Solidarity. On November 29th is the Day of Solidarity with the Palestinians that has been declared by the United Nations. But you could see in here that the Balfour Declaration becomes the document. For many of us, we could say it's Musmar Juha. Right? If you don't know Juha, Juha is the funny character in Islamic history that really try to point the contradictions in our daily life. So the Balfour Declaration is the nail of Juha that was placed, that was everything thereafter is built upon it, right, as a colonial structure. So in 1919, Balfour to Curzon in a letter, in Palestine, we do not propose even to go through the form of consulting the wishes of the present inhabitants of the country. The four great powers are committed to Zionism. And Zionism, be it right or wrong, good or bad, is rooted in age-long tradition, in present needs, in future hopes, of far profounder import than the desires and prejudices of 700,000 Arabs who now inhabit the ancient land. In short, so far as Palestine is concerned, the powers have made no statement of fact which is not admittedly wrong, and no declaration of policy which, at least in the letter, they have not always intended to violate, meaning they're not going to give the Palestinians any right whatsoever. Which gets me to an important point. Palestinians are facing not only Zionism, they're facing European powers and facing the United States, because the United States adopted the Zionist project as well from the time of President Wilson after World War I. And lastly, increasingly, we're facing some of our Arab and Muslim leaders and countries So increasingly I'm speaking about Christian Zionism, Jewish Zionism, and Muslim Zionism. That's what we are facing. So often we're appealing to the United States and Europe to recognize the human rights of the Palestinians. They are co-participants in the creation of the settler colonial state in Israel, and also continue to support Israel with weapons, continue to support it with casting veto in the United Nations. So we need to understand the contradiction from the get-go. When Great Britain conquered Palestine, they framed it as the coming to an end of the Crusades. That's how they actually published and declared it in the press, that now the Crusades come to an end. After 632 years of Muslim control, we're back, and now the Crusades came to an end. That's not my statement, that's the British press in 1917. And more importantly, the Foreign Secretary urged the British military, to accelerate the conquest of Palestine, should be offered as a Christmas gift to the British population. That's not my statement, that's their own statements about what is taking place. We have the ability right now to read their own documents and what they were saying at that instance. So Balfour Declaration is a colonial legalism. So that's a term I'm using, colonial legalism. Much of international law transferred colonial languages into international law. And international law increasingly and from the get-go has been shaped through colonial rights and frame it as the way for administering, relating, and determining the rights. Almost every conflict, international law is used colonial legalism. Let me ask the question in here, being a professor. Does anybody know what the doctrine of discovery is? Doctrine of discovery. While you think about that term, I'm going to drink water. That's what professors do in there. What is doctrine of discovery? Huh? Christopher Columbus. So Mr. Christopher Columbus. Okay. You know, Christopher Columbus was going to India, right? He was trying to get some spicy food. Right? Christopher Columbus was trying to get to India, and the native populations discovered that he was lost. Right? Because he came, he said, Namaste. He said, no, you're on the wrong continent, dude. Right? He was asking for spicy food. He said, no, we have only cornbread here. But important, while we digress on a joke, doctrine of discovery is the legal foundation for the United States. Whenever a conflict over land with the indigenous native population takes place, and they have no other resort back to the doctrine of discovery, where the rights to the land, right, were accorded to the settlers. Native population in America only have the right to benefit from the land, but not ownership of the land. And it's been determined in the Supreme Court. So you actually have Supreme Court cases where it refers back to the doctrine of discovery. Well, now, why do I say that? Balfour Declaration for the Palestinian is the doctrine of discovery of Zionism. That's why you have in Sheikh Jarrah, what is taking place in Sheikh Jarrah, we don't understand it. You go to the Supreme Court says, no, the right of the settlers to take over your land in Sheikh Jarrah and take over your house. Doctrine of discovery, Zionism, doctrine of discovery. You go to Salwan, doctrine of discovery. Wadi al-Jawz, doctrine of discovery. And the Israeli Supreme Court in early 1971-72 said that the Palestinian lands are disputed lands. That's their definition under Israeli law. So a Palestinian having their deeds from the Ottoman, from the Jordanians, is inadmissible. It's almost the settler who comes with a fictitious document like the Balfour Declaration given to him by his cousin, right? Comes in in the middle of the night, throw the Palestinian family out on the street, the Red Cross and the Red Crescent comes and give you a tent, and the settlers there protected by the military. In any civilized country, with between parentheses, thugs come to your house at the middle of the night, you call the police come and arrest the thugs. In Palestine, you call the police actually comes with the settlers, protect them, and point the gun at the Palestinians. Right? Zionism, doctrine of discovery, in effect on a daily basis. So colonial legalism. So we need to date the Nakba not in 1948. Palestinian Nakba begins in 1917. Because Britain came and facilitated the transfer of Palestinian lands to the Zionists, the World Zionist Organization, and incubated the Zionist project. And provided the Zionists with the facilities, military, economic, social, political standing for them to actually begin to incubate a state. Now, there is a question of why Britain wanted to do this. Britain wanted to secure the Suez Canal because much of Great Britain trade from India, they were robbing India blind, right? They took out of India $15 trillion or 15 trillion pounds. That's how Great Britain, the jewel of the crown, of the British crown was India. And all of the Indian wealth was being traded through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean to go to Great Britain. In India, the north was protected because they had the mountainous terrain in Afghanistan, and there you put another element, the Great Game. There was a great game between the British and the Russians who control Afghanistan. The British control of Afghanistan wanted to protect India from any possibility of entry into their Indian possession. So there is a period of conflict between the Russian and the British. It's called the Great Game. And that's why when the United States invaded Afghanistan, some say that this is the new Great Game because their attention is on the one hand between India, Pakistan, Iran, China, and Russia, and then the United States is playing in there. When they looked at Egypt, which was also their colonial possession, there was no protection. So they thought about a buffer state. On the other side, they were already in control of Egypt, colonized Egypt in 1882. And now they wanted to create a buffer state on the other side of the Suez Canal. That's what the British were thinking in relations to Palestine. And in this sense, sending the Jews to there, they've hit two birds with one stone. They were deeply, deeply anti-Semitic. Balfour was anti-Semite himself. The British were anti-Semitic, so you actually get the Jews out of Europe from their anti-Semitic perspective, and in the other you create this buffer state. All right, so the Nakba begins in 1917, and we need to understand it that the British have major responsibility as well as Zionism. I am a Palestinian that believe we need to file legal claims against Great Britain. Legal claim for the Balfour Declaration, legal claim for the dispossession of the Palestinians, legal claim for actually using anti-Semitism of their own type in order for them to impose Zionism and impose the Zionist project on the Palestinians. And then we'll deal with the compensation and claims against Zionism as well. But Great Britain has to be taken to task for what it has done. It made it possible for settler colonialism to take place. In 1918, Jewish population, predominantly Palestinian Jews, right? Around Nablus, around Tabariya, these were Palestinian Jews, about 60,000. From the possession of Great Britain of Palestine all the way up to the end of World War II, you could see the shift of population from 6% all the way to 30%. And by the time you get to 48, 35% of the population of Palestine was Zionist Jews, made possible by the British, facilitating this transformation. Settler colonialism used violence. British allowed Jewish paramilitary groups to become active during the Arab Revolt, 1936 to 39. There are many who ask why the Palestinians did not resist. Palestinians did resist. There's no such thing when people say, well, the first intifada was not in 1987. Palestinians protested and revolted in 1917, immediately after the British came. They revolted after the adoption of the League of Nations mandate in 1921-22. They had another revolt in 1925, another revolt in 1929. Then you had another mass mobilization in 1931, 32, 33, 34, all the way to 39. And more importantly, every period of these revolts and these mobilizations, the British actually exiled Palestinians. So if you go to Chile right now, there's a huge Palestinian population in there. Parts of it were exiled by the British. There are Palestinians in some of the islands. These were exiled from the British. Palestinian political leadership was exiled throughout these periods. And Arab machinations with Zionism begins much earlier than the Abraham Accords. King Abdullah or Prince Abdullah of Jordan signs an agreement with the Zionist movement in 1922, recognizing the Zionist rights over Palestine. Right? There's a whole book on it, The Collusion Across the Jordan River. You could actually read it. And then if you go to the Great Arab Revolt, right, which was not great nor was it Arab, right? 1916, the revolt against the Ottoman, on the promise that Great Britain is going to give Sharif Hussein to be the new caliph, an Arab caliph, if he revolted against the Ottomans. And as a consequence of this, his two sons, Faisal and Abdullah, one is given right to rule over Jordan, the other was actually put as a king in Iraq. In both cases, affirming the Sykes-Picot Agreement that was signed between the French and the British. We're still dealing with the consequences of the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Right, so many people say, where are the Palestinians? Why the Palestinians did not? They resisted. In the 1936 to 39 revolt, 5,000 Palestinians were killed. The British blew up Palestinian homes, like what you see right now taking place with the Israelis. They actually learned one of the earliest aerial bombardment of civilian targets. The British bombarded Palestinian civilian areas by aircraft at the time. So the Palestinians were facing both the Zionist paramilitary groups as well as the British forces at the time. Jabotinsky is really very important to know. Why Jabotinsky? Netanyahu's father is the editor of Jabotinsky's papers. All right? Jabotinsky is the founder, or you could say is the foundation for the Likud, for Israel right wing, is Jabotinsky. So Netanyahu's father is the editor of Jabotinsky's paper. So when you talk about Netanyahu, where his ideology comes from, you need to know that ideology and where this frame of thinking, and why he will not at any given point accept the Palestinian state, for those who think that the Palestinian state is going to emerge. All right? Jabotinsky is clearly, in his book, The Iron Wall, says the voluntary reconciliation with the Arabs is out of the question. Either now or in the future, if you wish to colonize a land in which people are already living, you must provide a garrison for the land. Or find some rich man or benefactor, Great Britain and then also later on the United States, who will provide a garrison on your behalf. Or else give up your colonization. For without an armed force, which will render physically impossible any attempt to destroy or prevent this colonization. Colonization is impossible. Not difficult, not dangerous, but impossible. Zionism is a colonization adventure, and therefore it stands or falls by the question of armed force. It is important to speak Hebrew, but unfortunately, it is even more importantly to be able to shoot, or else I am through playing colonization. This is Jabotinsky speaking. Naftali Bennett says, I killed so many Arabs. What's the problem? So direct line, so you need to understand what we're facing. And they come around talking as if they're Gandhi, right? Every person that comes about Israel is, oh, what about violence? And the only word they know is Hamas, Hamas. They confuse Hamas with hummus, and that's basically as far as they're concerned, right? And you'll have every one of them that actually serves in the Israeli military comes and poses the question to you while he or she that speaks to you have served in the Israeli army and shot a Palestinian. And they have the audacity to ask you about violence. Right? But that's also normative of colonial discourse. Every colonial power projected at the native indigenous population that they're violent. There is like you have a DNA marker called Muslim, Arab, Palestinian, is a DNA marker of violence. While our violence is for your good, even if it kills you, it's like a doctor, chemotherapy, it's just, sorry. That's why Madeleine Albright, 500 children in Iraq are killed, say, is the price worth it? She's with a straight face, the price is worth it. Can you imagine anyone of any Muslim background, Native American, Black, Latin America, being able to see 500,000 children being killed, the price is worth it? And she's not what you call a person right on the side of the street, she's the Secretary of State of this country. Right? So Naftali Bennett is actually represent the norm rather than the exception. Joseph White's head of the Jewish Agency Colonization Department in 1940 from a solution to the refugee problem. He said, between ourselves it must be clear that there is no room for both peoples together in this country. We shall not achieve our goal if the Arabs are in this small country. There is no other way than to transfer the Arabs from here to neighboring countries, all of them. Not one village, not one tribe should be left. The idea of transfer begins in the writing of Herzl. Gets to be adopted by the Zionist movement in the 1930s. Begins to be an effective policy during the Nakba of 1948. And continued to be the feature of Israeli policies relative to the Palestinians. Taking over land and expelling the Palestinians. Transfer. Settler colonialism, genocide, and transfer. So when you think of Sheikh Jarrah, it is a process of transfer. If you think about the annexation of the Golan Heights, it's a process of transfer. The Area C, which has been emptied of Palestinians since the Oslo, it's a process of transfer. Settler colonialism made Palestinians into a landless and stateless people. After paying a visit to Palestine in 1891, the Hebrew essayist Ahad Aham commented, abroad we are accustomed to believe that Israel is almost empty. Nothing is grown in here, and that whoever wishes to buy a land could come here and buy what his heart desires. In reality, that situation is not like this. Throughout the country, it is difficult to find cultivatable land which is not already cultivated. At the university and some of your people that come to lecture, they say, well, Israel made the desert bloom. This was desert areas, right? Now we notice that Palestine history is about 12,000 years of continuous history. The oldest olive tree in the world, not in Whole Food, right? The oldest olive tree in the world is 6,500 years, is in the West Bank in Palestine. So before your Whole Food had what you call these $50 bottle of olive oil, Palestinians were already making olive oil and sending it out. The city of Jericho is one of the earliest cities in the history, not of, Palestine, history of the humanity. Some say it's Jericho or Damascus. Cultivation of land, the earliest cultivation, agriculture is in Palestine. Domestication of animal is there. Right? The land of the Canaanites. Even, they say, well, Abraham, if you want to, since we're celebrating right now, coming into the Dhul Hijjah, and the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, Abraham was in Mesopotamia, migrated to Palestine. Palestine was already inhabited. The biblical text says that Abraham lived among the Canaanites as an alien. It says he spoke the language of the Canaanites. Right? That's, again, it's not my own writing, it's your own evidence. So Palestine was always cultivated. The 1936 revolt, right, political tension rose because of the sharp increase in Zionist immigration. In 1930, 4,000 Zionists officially arrived in Palestine. In 1935, that increased to 62,000. Rural rebellion climaxed in 1938. Why the Palestinians revolted? Because the new settlers took over land that both from some absentee owners in Lebanon, but also the British assigned for them public land, and they had a policy in their labor union to prohibit the hiring of Arab labor, Palestinian labor. Palestine was cultivated through sharecropping for the longest time. So you'll have a mass landowner, and these portions were, portioned and a sharecropping type because they did not yet develop into industrialization. So as the settlers and the settlements came, they evicted these population, labor that's been there for generations. So all of a sudden you have a mass labor revolt that took place as a result of these conditions. And lasted 3 years. Again, we could speak about the Arab world attempting to help the Palestinians. If they just could leave us sometimes alone, we would be better off. Right? When they come to help you, say, no, we're going to solve it for you. Run to the hills is much better. The Peel Commission and the beginning of the two-state solution. Right? Palestinians had a strong desire to national independence. Palestinians declared independence a number of times before then. There was widespread fear about the establishment of a Jewish homeland. It concluded that there were irreconcilable differences between Jews and Arabs. The Peel Commission recommended the creation of a small Jewish state. Interestingly enough, the recommendation to the Peel Commission came through the Zionist testimony. So they actually testified, and that was incorporated, their testimony incorporated, which came from Ben Gurion at the time in relations to these testimonies. Which happens to be the case that every time the Palestinians get engaged in these international settings, it's usually Israeli Zionist proposals packaged by the international community and offered as their ideas. Right? Clinton did that. So Clinton took Zionist Ehud Barak ideas, incorporated into the American proposal, and put it in front of the Palestinian as the peace proposal during the Camp David discussions with Yasser Arafat. So that's been going on for quite some time. So this was the partition plan that was introduced in 1937 with the Peel Commission, which served as the basis for the 1948-47 partition plan, creating this, the framing of the two-state solution. Resolution 181, that we still right now, the two-state solution is dead, but that's a separate issue altogether. We have one state, Zionist state in Palestine that is functioning as an apartheid state. Today in historical Palestine, there are about 6.8 million Palestinians and 6.8 million Jews living in historical Palestine. One population has full rights, other population is living in an apartheid structure with massive lands being confiscated. So binational state in 1947-48. Now, we need to understand why the ethnic cleansing took place in 48. Right? In the Zionist states that was allocated by the United Nations, there were 492,000 Zionist Jews and 430,000 Palestinian Arabs, meaning you had a binational state. The Zionists could not fathom that they will have a state that they don't have a decisive majority. So the plans for the ethnic cleansing of Palestine began much earlier than the partition plan. Actually, both Nur Masalha as well as Ilan Pape write about the village files, which was files that mapped the villages, the leaders, and so on for the period of the Nakba. So when the war in 48 began, it was a systematic use of massacres and violence in order to empty Palestine of its own population. 60 to 65% of all the population in Gaza are refugees that were expelled forcefully by Israel in 1948 as a result of trying to create a Jewish decisive majority state. And now it's being constantly demographically managed by bringing in Zionist Russian immigrant, by bringing U.S. Zionist immigrant, bringing immigrants in order to continue this demographic shaping of the state. So settler colonialism, and I spoke about settler colonialism and motherland colonialism. 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly transferred from their homes and land. 532 villages demolished and depopulated, 12 urban centers cleansed, 100 massacres done to cause the flight of the Palestinians. And that's a conservative estimate of 100 massacres. We know they're Yassin, but 100 massacres were committed against the Palestinians. Complexity of history. Zionists have argued that Palestinians were instructed to flee villages. Research by Benny Morris, Avi Schleim, Ilan Pape concluded that most Palestinians fled because their villages were attacked or out of fear. Schleim argues that the Hashemite rulers of Transjordan signed agreements with the Zionists to divide a conquered Palestine between them. So that's why Palestinian state did not emerge in 1948. It was an agreement between the Jordanians and the Zionists to prevent the Palestinian state from emerging. Because immediately after the 48 war, there is a meeting for the Palestinians in Gaza. They declared independence in September 1948. The Jordanian Hashemite kingdom, working with the Zionists, called for A'yan, and they had a meeting in Jericho where these A'yan declared that they want to be united with Jordan, and Jordan took over the West Bank and not allowing a Palestinian state to emerge. And thus Palestinians will not have sovereignty of the remaining territory, and Jordan becomes what you call the overseer of these territories. The key is a prevention of the Palestinians from having self-determination over their land, and that continues to be one of the main features to understand this dynamic. 3 different political structures that the Palestinians live. 1948, war 78% under the Israeli control, 22% divided into the West Bank, controlled by Jordan, and the Gaza Strip, administered by Egypt. More than 750,000 Palestinians were displaced and became refugees. Palestinians became internally displaced persons in Israel. One of the most unique classification that you'll find, and I challenge anyone to find any classification like this. In Israel, there are Palestinians that are called absentee, present, absentee. These were Palestinians at the time where the state was created. They were away from their home. So today I'm visiting here, right, in Illinois. My home is in Berkeley. So supposedly that there's a war and I'm stuck in here. Under Israeli law, as a result of their attempt to steal Palestinian land, I can't go back to my land. I am declared to be absent from my property. But I am present in the state, so I get Israeli citizenship. But the law says that I can't claim my property, so I am absentee. My property is confiscated into the state under the Jewish National Fund and allocated to Zionists to come and live in my home. So I am absent, present, absent. There is no classification anywhere in history, including, again, with indigenous population, that you find this classification. So now we're being called that it's Maghrib. We'll pray, inshallah, and come back to some discussion thereafter, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل وسلم.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
لا إله إلا الله. استقيموا واعتدلوا وجهوا قلوبكم إلى الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلاة من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. ما بدأتش أصلا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. I thought today is Friday. Okay, tomorrow is the first day of the Hijjah. So inshallah, may Allah bless these 10 days for us, and may Allah let us be able to worship Him and to get closer to Him and to do our best inshallah in these 10 days. I remind you about the day of Arafah will be the 19th, and the day of Eid will be July 20th, and we will have the Salah at 10 o'clock, inshallah, outside. Inshallah, if the weather permit, inshallah. And may Allah make it easy, inshallah. So Eid Mubarak from now to all of you, inshallah. From the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, there is two types of takbir. We call it the takbir muqayyad, which is after the salawat. After the salawat, it has to do with salawat, and it starts actually at the dawn of the day of Arafah. Fajr Yawm Arafah, at the dawn of day of Arafah. After each salah, we do takbirat, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Lillahi alhamd, until the last day of Tashriq, which is the last day of Eid. So the day of Eid, then 3 days. The third day, after the day of Eid, that would be the last takbirat, which is takbir muqayyad. It's restricted with and connected with the salawat. But there is something we call it takbir aam, mutlaq. Means the Sahaba used to do takbirat once the moon of Dhul Hijjah sighted, they start doing takbirat. So let's do the takbir. This is not the takbir muqayyad. This is not the takbir after the salah. That's why I'm talking. I'm just giving some time so we can do the takbirat, inshallah, to enjoy and to get the reward out of that. All together right now, this is takbir mutlaq, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Abu for reminding us. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, wa lillahi alhamd. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, wa lillahi alhamd. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, wa lillahi alhamd. Again, this is not after the salah, it's after the speech. Jazakumullah khair, taqabbal Allah. If we can kindly delay the sunnah or pray the sunnah as quick as you can, inshallah, to get back to our program. Jazakumullah khair, barakallahu fikum.
بس في minutes تذكر حكيت لك عن ابني راح يتخرج من الهاي سكول هذه السنه يعني بيبدا في اغسطس يتخرج ف we have to do something اما يروح على بيركلي او الزيتون.
Are you ready to continue or I'm here with you till suhoor, just prepare for next Ramadan. So, Bismillah. So, when we think about the settlement, the settlers, the continued confiscation of land, from the time of the signing of the Oslo Agreement, Oslo was signed in 1993, and at the time of the signing of the Oslo Agreement, there were approximately 195, some puts it even at a lower level, 135 to 140,000 settlers in the West Bank. Now the number of settlers in the West Bank are about 660,000 settlers. So you're talking about from 130, 140 to 660,000 settlers that have moved into the West Bank. Also, if we think about the city of Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem in 1967 has been expanded almost six-folds into what is called now the Greater Municipality of Jerusalem. All that land is taken and confiscated from the Palestinians. Right? So when Israel says about Jerusalem, Greater Jerusalem, all that land is confiscated and taken from the Palestinians. So we have a one state, in effect, that is an apartheid state, and continue to confiscate and take Palestinian land on a continuous basis. Now, many of us became aware of the dynamics of this Ramadan, right? And the attack that took place, both in Sheikh Jarrah, but more importantly, the assault on Al-Aqsa, because all of the, especially the settlers, the extreme settlers, are moving to try to demolish, to try to undo the Al-Aqsa area to build the third temple. And in this sense, this is a real threat because even under the Al-Aqsa, there have been diggings that have been taking place that is weakening the structure in terms of what has been transpired. Now, to orient us, when we think about the old city of Jerusalem, right, this is just a general topography of what you have in terms of Al-Haram al-Sharif. Now, when we say Al-Aqsa, is not the two buildings. People get confused. They think that Al-Aqsa is one of the two buildings, the Dome of the Rock or the Aqsa, the Qibli Mosque. These two buildings are within the Al-Aqsa compound. So all of that land, about 135 acres, is the Al-Aqsa. The buildings are two buildings out of 9 buildings where people pray on Al-Aqsa compound. So it's very important to understand about the nature of the Al-Aqsa compound. Now, do you see there's an area there called the Al-Buraq? Right? It's right there. It's referenced in there with between parentheses as the Wailing Wall. And then you have a courtyard in front of the Al-Buraq area. That area actually is the Moroccan Quarter. When Israel occupied the Jerusalem, they immediately demolished the Moroccan Quarter, and that courtyard in front of the Wailing Wall today is Waqf properties that have been set up by the Moroccans for almost 800 plus years. One of the early ones is Prince Muhammad Marini, who set up the Waqf for the Hujjaj from Morocco to come when they go to Hajj, or when they come back to Hajj, they come and spend time in Jerusalem. So that is a whole area that is Moroccan property. There was the Wailing Wall Commission that was set up by the British in 1930 after the 1929 uprising. And it determined that these properties, even the area that Israel claims to be the Wailing Wall, belongs to the Moroccans. Right, so I recommend for people, it's available online, the Wailing Wall Commission of 1930, a British commission as a result of the uprising that took place, fomented at the time by Jabotinsky. Right, so again, just in reference to it. So in the Bab al-Amud area, which you will see often Palestinians, is a site of the entrance to the Palestinians into the old city for the Muslim quarter. So many of the efforts by the settlers are to take the land and the property outside of the immediate area around the Damascus Gate and try to encircle the internal access to the old city, to the Muslim quarter and Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. So they're moving with it systematically, especially in Sheikh Jarrah is a very important cross point for access to Al-Aqsa Mosque. And they say it literally out loud of what they are intent in doing in trying to take over these lands or these properties. Again, this is another map when we think of Al-Aqsa compound and what it represents, and this is the old city. Another point for people to know, this is just in reference. There is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the most sacred site for Christians. The door for the church is actually held by a Muslim family, the Nusaybi family. And every morning they come and open the church, and in the evening they close the church. This has been an arrangement for the longest period because the various Christian sects don't get along and also had a conflict of who should hold the key to the church. So they entrusted it from the time of Salah ad-Din to the Muslim family. Right? So this is something when you speak about to your Christians, they should know who's actually have continued to honor and respect the sacred sites of the Christians. Almost on a daily basis, these right-wing settlers that want to build the temple, which they educate their kids about demolishing Al-Aqsa Mosque and demolishing this area, they attack with the protection of the Israeli police and military. They come upon the Al-Aqsa area. And you could see the Israeli military in there protecting them. Right? These are not your tourists trying to take a selfie. These are people that with this attitude that we will take over, we want to take over this area, that these mosques and this area needs to be demolished, and we need to build the third temple in that location. Again, this is on a daily basis, protected. These are your right-wing settlers that the Palestinians are facing. While Palestinians, you saw on the Laylat al-Qadr, on the 27th night of Ramadan, the Israeli army and military coming and attacking people, stun grenades, smoke bombs, tear gas, while people are still praying. And you had a number of people who were praying there, and literally they hit them and dragged them while in the middle of prayer. All right, so on the one hand, facilitating this, and they're moving in the same way that they moved with Al-Khalil. So if anybody visited Al-Khalil, Shari' al-Shuhada, they began by taking houses, then providing what you call setting up security and access, and now Palestinians can't actually walk in the streets and open their businesses in Al-Khalil, and then the Ibrahim Mosque was completely taken over with restrictions on Palestinian and Muslim access. So this is the recipe, this is the strategy that is being deployed. Again, these are daily occurrences of individuals coming in from the extreme right-wing settlers with the idea of establishing a right to be in this area with the plan of having to set up the founding stone. Like almost every Friday, there is an attempt to put a founding stone on the Aqsa compound by these individuals. So this is a daily occurrence in there. And so these large groups as well brought into the Al-Aqsa compound. Right? These are your most racist right-wing settlers that are coming with attitudes toward the Palestinians, toward the Muslims, that even to say it's racist is a clean version of what you are dealing with, right, on a daily basis. And again, sometimes the military is always there, Israeli military, Palestinians. Now look at where the flag, Israeli flag, so there's always an attempt to try to take a house, take a property, and sometimes when you go to Old Jerusalem, you could tell where the settlers have taken because they are often putting the flag, and also they're doing what you call flags with lights at night. So you could tell where the Israeli settlers have taken some property within the old city. As not only enough that they stole a house of a Palestinian, in essence, is almost like to put it in your face that this is what we are doing with the protection of the military. So the police is constantly in there harassing the Palestinians on Al-Aqsa compound as a daily occurrence. Just as a separate, this is the Dome of the Rock. It's built on top of the rock where the Prophet have ascended. And this is the what's called Masjid al-Qibli, often said as the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but all of the territory is Al-Aqsa Mosque. So this is at the end of the compound facing the Qibla. And this was the instruction of Umar radiallahu anhu of where to build. So many Palestinians are unable to make it to Al-Aqsa Mosque to pray on Friday. Right? Now you could actually have somebody that is born in the West Bank, grow up, and is have not been able to visit Al-Aqsa Mosque. Right? And literally it would have been in a walking, you could walk to Al-Aqsa Mosque, but you are unable because of the restrictions. Same for the Christian Palestinians. There are Christian Palestinians who grew up and they have not made it to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Which gets us in terms of critiquing some of our Muslim normalizers who go on a fully paid trip by your local Zionists, and they go and take a selfie in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they think that they have accomplished an accomplishment where the Palestinians across down the street, right, 3 or 4 miles away, have not been able to make it to Al-Aqsa Mosque to pray for Jum'ah. And you notice during the Ramadan, the Israelis wanted to prevent buses coming from 48. And they stopped the buses and they wanted people to restrict them. And the Palestinians of Jerusalem came out and blocked the other side of the freeway. So basically they brought the whole traffic of the whole country almost to a standstill, that the Israeli police relented and let people actually through to pray from the 48 area. So this is what the Palestinians facing on a daily basis. Now, often Palestinians want, if your father died, mother, cousin, so on, you want to take him for a funeral in Al-Aqsa Mosque. You're not allowed. You can't bring the funeral to pray upon them in Al-Aqsa. So you end up praying outside with the restrictions on the street. Right? So again, just to think about, often some of our elders will have a wasiyah, please, that if I die, take my funeral on Al-Aqsa. And again, there are many funerals that takes place usually on Al-Aqsa for the Jerusalem population or from 48. But if you're in the West Bank, you can't. You're literally, sometimes you are able to take the body and walk to Al-Aqsa, but you're not allowed. So that's where you end up having the prayer occurring in the street. So this was the assault on the Al-Aqsa compound during the Ramadan and the destructions that have been visited. In here you have what you call a historical landmark, right? Historical, a 100-year-old building is a historical landmark. And they preserve it, and the Historical Society have a committee, rightly so. These are properties that are 1,400 years plus in old. And yet the Israeli police come firing tear gas, having no basic respect to the sanctity of the mosque. Sometimes they also come in with they never take their shoes off, right? But they actually fire tear gas, stun grenades, and they come and throw books, Quran on the ground. They have no restraint to what is being done to the Palestinians in that area. So Palestine from Oslo to apartheid, all these Palestinians are, we call the map of the West Bank the tiger's skin, right? You know how this tiger has, that's what the Palestinian so-called Oslo state is about. And if you take bypass roads, these are all the roads, lands have been taken from the Palestinians. These are roads that are for settlers. Palestinians can drive on the roads that are built over their land. And then West Bank settlements that are crisscrossing and dotting Palestinian areas. Then you have the wall that encircles, likewise took about 3% of the Palestinian land in the West Bank just for the wall, and also it sits on top of the aquifers. So the aquifers and access to the water right now is in Israel's hand. Close to 800,000 trees have been uprooted to build the wall. So if you compare it to the Central Park in New York, it is as if Central Park in New York, trees were completely cut. Now the critique here in the United States is that the environmental movement have not said a word. You know, I come from Berkeley. We have people that are, hug a tree and climb a tree and stay in the tree for 3 years. Right? Some of my students, but that's, they're missing classes. Right? Good. The Prophet ﷺ hugged the trunk of a tree, right, in the mosque. But when it comes to Israel, there is no critique whatsoever from the environmental movement. There is no critique about the misuse of water. An Israeli uses almost 20 times as much water as a Palestinian. And 2 days ago, the Israelis are selling water to Jordan. Our water, Palestinian water, stolen from the Palestinians, being sold to Jordan. Also, the Israelis mandate that we buy our own water from Israel, which is our water. So they pump the water out from the aquifers and sell it to the Palestinians. And if you don't pay, they confiscate and put restrictions on you. So this is the Palestinian historic compromise, right, that continues to unfold as we speak. We're talking about 15%, and even that 15% of Palestine is being devoured. And this is Al-Aqsa compound again, in terms of all the details about it. I think people need to spend some time to know about the details, and hopefully we could have a program on that. Israeli bypass roads, about 800 kilometers, about 3% of historic Palestine is the bypass roads. These are Jewish-only roads. Rules of colonization. I think many of you watched the video 2 days ago of Muntasir Shalabi's home that has been blown up, a form of collective punishment. And then in Wadi al-Jawz and Silwan, people were forced to demolish their own homes. And for those who know, in Palestine, it takes so much effort just to build your own home, to put together their limited resources to build a house. And you are forced, either you demolish it with your own hands, or you pay a fine, $6,000 for the Israeli to demolish your own home. So most often people actually take and they actually demolish their own homes. So just think about how painful it is for someone to actually, who spent 20 to 30 years to build their home, that they're actually having to take a hammer and destroy their own home, and then having to have a tent to live on top of the rubble because there's no other place to go. It's not like Illinois is saying, come for a vacation and we could give you property, or California or Disney. There's no Disneyland, right? So that's really, if to think about what the Palestinians, residency and citizenship, family unification, curfews and closures, property takeover, administrative detention, water. Again, water has been such an endemic issue for the Palestinians because the water has been stolen by the settlers. You go to a settlement and they're living like they're in Illinois, New York, or in Los Angeles with swimming pool and green lawns. All that water is stolen from the Palestinians. So the ongoing Nakba can be, again, construction of Israeli Jewish settlements, control over all resources, enacting of laws enabling it to confiscate Palestinian-owned land, demolition of more than 18,000 houses from 1967 to 2007. We could actually update it now to much more. 25% of Palestinians living in Palestine were arrested, which is equal to the African American. In here, 1 in 4 African Americans has been arrested or in parole and so on. So that actually almost the Palestinians have the same identical time of percentage. Discriminatory policies against Palestinians living inside Israel, prevention of refugees and internationally dependent persons from returning, unrecognized villages, especially in the Naqab, where they constantly are being shifted from one place, the wall and its associate regime of control and segregation, permits. You need permits for everything. You need permits to work. You need permits for housing. You need permits to travel. You need permits to go to cross the checkpoint to go to your school. Right? Some of our faculty colleagues in Bir Zayt or Al-Quds University or Najah, they have to go through literally barriers and barriers, and sometimes really in a very insidious way. Like you'll have the first day of classes, and some of your women faculty are dressed for the occasion. It's the first day. They'll make sure to put what you call tar on some of the walls where they have to climb over because they're not allowed to go. So as they climb on the wall, all their clothes are filled with tar, dark tar that is just think about it. Your first day of school, you're going to give a lecture to your students, and that's what you are facing as a woman faculty. Not to say about the men, again, the same circumstances. And, for those who possibly listen to some of our colleagues, this is what you experience. For no other reason, just spiteful, just to get you the sense that you are unequal. You just cannot have a day of you are not feeling the burden of this colonial occupation. Right? Checkpoints, closures, denial of family reunification, arbitrary torture, arrest, demolition, and so on. So these are, we could go on longer, but I could, take your time to answer any of your questions. I have 2 things that I wanted to actually for apps that I wanted you to possibly share and download. One is for my son. He has developed a new app, which is a financial app that allows you to send checks back and forth and be able to do that. So if you're able to use it, by all means, it's Checkmate with his friend. The other app is the Islamophobia reporting app. Now, I want people to download the Islamophobia reporting app. I run the Islamophobia Studies Center. We don't have data. You could tell me about the feeling of being what you call facing Islamophobia, but if you don't give me data, I can't speak to it. Right? So we need people to download and report. And I know sometimes, hey, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to, reward me for being patient. Yeah, be patient, but aqil. Tie your camel or your Hummer or Lexus. Right? So if somebody is pulling a hijab for women, 80% of physical attacks, Islamophobic attack, is target Muslim women. Right? So even your Islamophobic racists are cowards. They attack Muslim women in public space. Right? So again, make sure that you submit it and give us the data. And you could submit it in Arabic too. So the app is applicable both in Arabic and English. So really this is for me. Also, I could speak about that the bulk of the funding for the Islamophobia industry comes from pro-Israel sources. Right? And some of the key Islamophobes in the country are your major Zionists, Daniel Pike, Stephen Emerson, Frank Gaffney, Pamela Geller, David Horowitz. Right? All these are your major Islamophobic figures that demonize and put out all type of insidious material on the Muslim population. So I'm also from the side of dealing with Palestine. And then you could download the Islamophobia Studies Journal. It's accessible for free. And we shall return. عائدون غدا, inshallah. So if you have any questions, by all means. Bismillah. No, I'll stay up. No? Are you? In the meantime, you could use this until they come back with batteries.
In the meantime, think of questions. And I have many. Bismillah. Okay, there we go. Okay. Actually, before we get into Q&A, we have a brother in our presence who is running for Congress in our district, and I just wanted to introduce him really quickly so that he can come up and say who he is. So, his name is Brother Junaid Ahmed, and he's among our attendees tonight, and he's going to run for District 8 in Illinois. So please welcome him. Join me in an applause.
Alaikum salam. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dr. Hatem, it was great to hear from you. I was in your class in 1998,
Wow.
Laytuna College. It was great to be in your company again. Jazakallah khair. And a couple of things I want to very quickly talk about. As I was listening into your presentation, one of the key things that kept coming back to me, I was in Tel Aviv in 2015. So I was there for about a week for business, for work. And I was going back and forth to Masjid al-Aqsa until, when I got there, it was an amazing experience. At the airport, very warm welcome. I was surprised. They actually asked for my papers about 7 weeks, 8 weeks in advance. So at the airport, it was literally like they were expecting me, right? Very warm welcome. I was there for about a couple of days. One day we're going through the checkpoint. We go through this checkpoint every day. From Tel Aviv to Aqsa, there is a checkpoint that we pass. One day we go fine, second day we go fine, third day we go fine. Fourth day, same thing, because I'm in an Israeli car, keep in mind, with an Israeli driver, and I have my wife and my 2-year-old with me. My wife being in hijab and the way I look, one day we're just going, and we passed the checkpoint. Literally a second later, a soldier sees the car going. He comes running and puts the gun against the window of the car. And then there's a second and a third and a fourth soldier coming from one side. Then the checkpoint soldier who let us go is watching. And then the Israeli driver who I was with steps out. They have a long conversation. The only American is the only word that I understand, and they go long, and then they let us go. But those brief 90 seconds, maybe 3 minutes, I don't know exactly, that brief amount of time speaks a lot as to how a Palestinian lives their life. Just because I'm in an Israeli car, we pass through. The minute they realize that this is a Muslim and maybe a Palestinian, how dare that car goes by without being checked, without being harassed. And that's the life in a day of a Palestinian. Having an AR-16 or whatever machine guns they had right at yourself, your wife and your 2-year-old daughter, was not a pleasant experience. That was a scary experience for those couple of minutes. Our brothers and sisters are living through that hell every day. Another day, we are coming back from Bethlehem, and we are stopped at this checkpoint, and the soldier speaks very fluent English. Young man, maybe 20, 21, maybe younger, I don't know. And when I was talking, I asked him, "Your English is so good, did you study in America?" And this guy goes, "Well, I'm an American citizen." I'm taking a step back. What is an American citizen, my fellow citizen, doing here serving in a foreign government's army? My dear brothers and sisters, this is the time for us to wake up. To wake up and stand up against this oppression, against this one-sided policy that this great nation has. I am sick of being oppressed. I am sick of being weak. I am sick of complaining. I am sick of being in protest and getting nothing in return except a few pleasant words. I am sick of going up to our elected representatives and asking them for justice, begging them for justice, and return get a few words that starts that Israel is, obligated to defend its existence. We're not challenging that. We're asking that there should be a single standard of human rights. There should be a single standard of human rights for people in America, for people in Latin America, people in Palestine, people in Kashmir, people across the globe. And that is not too much to ask for. These are human beings. These are not animals. These are your brothers. These are my brothers. These are your sisters. These are my sisters. What we are asking for is not too much. It is a very simple standard, a simple right that we as a people need to stand up for. We either be a bystander, we keep complaining for next 20 years, or we stand up and demand what is right. Stand up for what is right for people in Illinois District 8. About 10% of the population is living without any health insurance. We have issues that people are not able to pay their college debts. It's basic, simple human rights. We are the only developed nation on the planet who does not consider healthcare as a human right. It is time for us to stand up and ask for those rights. And that's what we're doing. We're standing up. We're going to take what is rightfully ours. We're going to stand up. We're going to speak what is right. We're going to continue to speak against oppression. We're not going to be begging anymore. We're going to participate in this democracy. And we are, as a people, going to stand up and take what is rightfully ours. This is the time for us to speak up. We can continue to complain or speak up. We chose to speak up. I look forward to, inshallah, having more of these conversations with you. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah, Brother Junaid. And I'm sure that there's more information on his website as well, so please go ahead and look him up. Now we will continue our Q&A. Before we do that.
No, I'm okay. Yeah.
Okay, should I? All right.
Go ahead.
Okay, so then we will continue our Q&A. So the first question, and it's actually a very beautiful question that came from one of our brothers, is what does a free Palestine look like?
Well, a free Palestine would look like, it looks like there is no 570 checkpoints that is preventing Palestinians from breathing, that it looks like people having access to their free water that is theirs. It should be that people have the freedom to move and travel. It will be an end to a settler coming from New York and landing in Palestine and being able to evict a Palestinian from their home and land and take it over. So Palestinians are asking for full freedom and full justice. There is no such thing as having half a justice or half freedom. That's what it looked like. Today, Palestinians have none of that. And how to get there, that requires for us to do the needed work.
And to build off of that question, the next question this person asks is, how can a Jewish population of over 5 million people coexist with the return of Palestinians from a 70-year diaspora?
Well, that's a technical problem. That's not a fundamental problem. If South African blacks and whites were able to reconcile which I think they had far more destructive relations than what we had in Palestine. This is often is a question or a frame that constructed around fear, that if we just give the Palestinians, allow them to return, they're going to be, quote, the monsters. That's a basic Zionist, what you call fear, and I think it is a fear coming from deep down, knowing that they have robbed and dispossessed the Palestinians. It's somebody that have stolen a jacket of a person, and they're only wanting that person to say, I'm not going to come back to claim my jacket. You don't need to see me, because I know that I'm wearing your jacket. Israel is wearing the Palestinian jacket inside out. They're using Palestinian lemons inside out, the orange groves, the dates, the water, everything relative to Palestine is being the hummus. And don't tell me I'm Nabilsi. There is like Israeli kanafe. That's for me. It's just I went to protest just because of that claim, but we leave it aside, right? So again, Israel have constructed its state on top of the Palestinians and dispossessed the Palestinians, took over their land. When we talk about 12 urban centers, just think about Wheaton, all of the population of the city completely emptied, and you have people coming and literally the next day coming into the house with all the furniture, or your glassware, or your kitchen stuff, all the garage, the grass, your trees, whatever you have, that group is taken over, and then the next day they say, you're expressing hate toward me because you're pointing out that I stole your stuff. That's basically what's taking place on a daily basis. And they want us to apologize the fact that we're talking that somebody have robbed us literally in daylight. I refuse to be what you call a therapist for settler colonialism. Like if you can't deal with the truth, I have a few therapists that I could recommend for you. But I'm not going to be a person that is going to be a therapist to settler colonialism. Like a settler coming and taking, like in Sheikh Jarrah, it's just like literally coming and taking over and beginning to build in the yard of a family. And the military is sitting there and protecting this person. This person's coming and taking and building in the yard of a person, and then taking their possessions and setting their own house in there. So, for me, that's a question of a technical questions of, if the monsters come, what we're going to do, right? If you watch the movie Monster Incorporated, that's what is being posited. The Palestinians are the Monster Incorporated. And make us fear about what will be the consequences.
Yes, and I'm sure we've all had, different experiences. I myself had olive oil, ordered from West Bank in Palestine, yet here they got offended because it was from Palestinian land instead of what they were claiming for it to be theirs. So you're true in what you say. The next question is, going forward, how should the Palestinian conflict be dealt with as a Palestinian conflict, an Arab issue, or an Islamic concern?
I think anyone that has an interest in addressing the rights of the Palestinians should be engaged in. I do think that this dichotomy that is being created is Palestine is not a Palestinian issue, it's not an Arab issue, it's a Muslim issue. I think it's a rendition that is problematic. I think Palestinians would seek the support of any human being that is interested in the rights of the Palestinians. Some of the best advocates for Palestine right now actually happen to be some of our Jewish progressives here in the United States. Some of the ones that are extending the most support for Israel are some of our Muslim brothers who are ruling in the Muslim world. So saying, well, Palestine should be a Muslim issue. Yes, it should be a Muslim issue. It should be an Arab issue. It should be a Palestinian issue. It should be a human rights issue across the board. And so I think we often put ourselves in these boxes and tie ropes around ourselves without recognizing what is taking place. I think we have to set a set of principles of what are the principles we operate by, and ask people to be in solidarity with the principles we operate by. And again, I'm very critical of the development that is taking place in the Muslim world. Not only in relations to Palestine, again, setting Palestine aside. This character, Moody, right? He was feted with the highest civilian honor by Muslim countries. He was given a red carpet. Right? He was allowed to give a speech in a stadium. No, in Emirates, he visited Saudi Arabia, he visited Iran, he visited Turkey. Right? Visited Palestine, the Palestinian Authority welcomed him. Huh? No, he visited Turkey, Moody. If I'm incorrect, I will check on it. But he visited all of the region, and he was vetted as, why would you allow him to give actually a speech in the middle of a Muslim country? He's committed genocide in Gujarat. He has removed citizenship from almost 5 million Muslims in the Assam, right? Transformed the rights of the Muslims in India as being colonial. That's what he said, that the Hindu nationalists, the Hindutva RSS. Right? So it's not only in Palestine, but also in relations to your Muslim population. Then you talk about the Uyghur in China. We have a mass mobilization to critique China, and then the Muslim countries put out a statement in support of China's position in the United Nations. So these are, we're literally, sometimes you watch the news, and it's actually, you scratch your head, is this Comedy Central or is this the news? Because the Comedy Central is less funny than the news in terms of what people are conducting on their daily basis.
So the next question comes from a sister. She asks, how can we shift the public view to understand that Palestine does not equal Hamas?
Well, that requires for us to continue to work. One is that we need to share more information. We can't only respond when only the situation gets more what you call dire, and therefore people mobilize. Every day there's Palestinians being shot and killed, but we don't respond. Like the news says, violence returns to the Holy Land. Was violence in vacation in Santa Barbara, and then just all of a sudden decided to come back? Violence returned to the Holy Land. Where was it? Or maybe we went with Elon Musk to Mars and just decided to come back. Violence is there every day. Palestinians live in violence every day under occupation. Every morning you get up, you're facing the settlements, you're facing the checkpoints, you're facing violence. So we need to convey to people that information and be systematic about it, right? Then when you deal with reducing Palestinians to Hamas, then you deal that, for 1948, Hamas was not there. So what was the problem that you ethnically cleansed 750,000? Hamas was not there in 67. Hamas was not there in 73, 74, was not there in 78, was not there in 85, 86, 87. So this is what, again, Hamas is Musmar Juha, is the, what you call the nail of Juha, that is used before Hamas was the PLO. Right? Literally from 1960s all the way up to the signing of Oslo, the problem was the PLO. Every time you want to go, what about the PLO? Now it's shifted. The PLO has become subcontractors, right, with the Palestinian Authority, and now you use Hamas as a way to not deal with the rights of the Palestinians. So, again, if the question is about violence in general, Israel has been committing violence on the Palestinians on a daily basis. Now, if somebody is trying to put Gandhi methodology, we could talk and discuss. Let's have a discussion. But these are people that are committed to structural violence.
So to speak up is the best way to...
Speak and teach people and educate them, provide information, media, facts, figures, I think when you come to the social media, I think the Palestinians have been able to get their narrative out and have been very impactful, even in the past, few years.
And on the point of media, another sister asks, why did the UN stay silent as Palestine was attacked during settler colonialism? Where was the media in 1948, and what happened to the human rights?
Well, the thing is that we live in a world system dominated by the major powers. For Europe and the United States, Israel is a success case. Right? For the United States, for Europe, This is a success case, and also this is for them a preparation for the second coming for those who prescribe to the speculative theology of the Christian coalition. So they support Israel to the hilt, and that's why they're silent. In the United Nations, the United States have cast so many vetoes against the Palestinians getting their rights. Not only that, but they actually support Israel militarily. Where is the F-16 coming from? From the United States. Where are the tanks coming from? The United States. Where are the Patriot missiles? From the United States. The drones, the United States. The bullets from the United States. The surveillance, both the technology they developed as well as the technology and the information coming from the United States. So we have a serious problem in here, is that we think that the West is the site of human rights toward us. I don't believe that both the United States or Europe is committed to human rights. Not only for the Palestinians, again, I do work on many issues. France has been deploying forces and engaged in intervention in the Francophone countries, in Senegal, in Mali, right? It did not stop. It's intervened in Algeria. It's intervened in Libya, in Tunisia. The United States, human rights, if you think about the United States, have been at war almost every 2 years since its existence. And again, we have what you call the United States of amnesia, right? The invasion of Iraq, who's responsible for that? Who can answer for it? Where were the human rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Where is the Geneva Fourth Convention? Palestinians, again, I speak as a Palestinian, we have what you call the problem is that we tend to know the name of every UN Secretary General, right? We get to know every US Secretary of State. We tend to know every European Union envoy, as if like God struck us to know these persons who actually can't even determine what type of shoes they're going to wear, yet they come to us and parade as they're the ones that are going to address our needs, and they go around and they just pony around and have public relations with Israel. Like at a certain time, we should have what you call the dignities. Like really, if you want to have frequent miles, go to the Bahamas, don't come to Palestine. Unless you have something serious to offer, go frequent miles, go to some places, the Bahamas, Cancun, like Ted Cruz, right? Go there. Just don't send us another envoy to think that, I'm coming in there to talk to you and help you. Every time they visit Palestine, they actually ask the Palestinians about Israeli prisoners that are held by the Palestinians. That's what they are. There's 8,000 Palestinian prisoners sitting and rotting in Israeli jails, and none of these people come to ask a question about them. Supposedly they are the custodians of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's like frozen. That's why, like when these people come and they want to talk to you about international law, teach us about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I says, yeah, I'm into what you call debating team and discussions, but show me the results. Show me accounting for all the deaths that have been caused in Iraq. Let's just be straight. How about what you call the death that under your tutelage in Egypt? Right? The Sisi is celebrated as a new what you call figure. So at a certain point, we have to be serious. And the thing is that to abandon this often discourse of adab, of like, we're so concerned about what you call not offending people. No, justice has to be said. Statement of truth has to be said. If you can't handle it, again, I'm not your therapist. So don't be politically a therapist for people that don't even understand the dignity of the human being to express the human rights. So you can't talk to Palestinians while sending F-16 to Israel. You can't give a gun to a person knowingly that person is killing another person. Israel is killing the Palestinians. The United States is providing them weapons. And if you can't, again, you could continue to do it, but don't come and talk to our face about that you are upholding human rights. So that's...
Yes, I think you made a lot of good points there, Professor Hatem. And we're actually going to open the floor to questions for everyone here. If you have a question, please raise your hand and you can stand up and speak it. So yes,
I saw he had wasta. He had what you call...
Okay, go ahead, brother.
Wa alaikum assalam. Into what? Into what? Where? In the United States or other places? Well, again, PDS works systematically. For us, AMP, we're working on a mass appeal to the PDS because we have adopted the date boycott. The date boycott is a mass appeal for the segments that buys or attempts to buy Israeli dates. In other sectors, you move systematically to centers of impact, right? So student populations was first. Now we're moving to appeal to unions, and then you move to the general population. You don't begin with the general population without actually starting where are nodes of influence and impact. And I think it's moving in that direction in the United States. In Europe, in different places, are much more stronger and have at least successfully been able to register a mass appeal. So different regions and different places have different strategies that need to be deployed, but I think we're moving into that direction or that arena. Now, the PDS is being entered into resolutions at the different democratic central committees. We're losing some of those votes. Again, it's a long-term struggle in that area, but you could see there's a mass appeal that is there. And that's why Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs is attempting to use legislation to silence people. It's because of success, not because of failure.
The second question that I had was, I remember about 12 or 13 years ago, there was a famous debate between Noam Chomsky and Alan Dershowitz. And it created a pretty big impact on the academic level. Is this something that you also engage in, academic debates? Do you feel that they help, at least within academia? To what effect?
I think you're talking about not Alan Dershowitz and Norman Finkelstein, not Noam Chomsky.
There's one with Noam Chomsky as well in Boston at Harvard.
Okay.
So is this something that you also engage in, meaning academic debates, and do you feel that they have a strong impact in shaping at least people within academia?
I don't think that debates right now are the way to shape the discussions in academia. I think we passed the line of debates in terms of Palestine. Now what we're having is the putting resolutions for academic associations where our opposition is coming out, right? So there is a debate taking place, but now it's at an association level. And so far, I think we're moving in a very systematic way for associations, academic associations, not only to embrace the BDS, but also to effectively express solidarity with the Palestinians, beginning with the American Studies Association, the Asian American Studies Association, Native American Studies Association. There's also at MESA resolutions. So you're dealing with a large cluster of people that have shifted. And I think that shift began post, or at least midway through Obama's presidency, especially after the 2014 Israeli attack on Gaza. And I think as a result of this May assault on Al-Aqsa and on Gaza, I think that the academic arena have shifted very rapidly away from Israel. And I don't think that Israel can put Humpty Dumpty back again in terms of their position. It's no longer defensible.
One final question I had was, are there still a lot of Muslim groups within America that are in opposition to what you're calling for?
A large Muslim, there isn't large Muslim group, but there are still some Muslim groups that they think the way to make it as a Muslim in America is to partner with the Zionists. So again, there are a number of organizations, and I would say a number of leaders within those organizations. I don't want to tarnish the whole organization. A number of leaders have taken normalization, relations with the Zionists, as a way for opening the door. And I think that's where that critique has to be for us, both to speak to their rank and file, to their supporters, but also to speak to some of those leaders that they think they could arrive by relations, whether with the AJC, American Jewish Committee, the ADL, American Anti-Defamation League, the JCRC, Jewish Community Relations Council, or you have the group that's the MLI, Muslim Leadership Initiative. All these, I would say it's a very small sector that believes their arrival is by partnership with the Zionists as a door openers for them in civil society. They're mistaken, and I don't think that they represent the large swath of Muslim population in the country.
Okay, going forward, brothers, sisters, please use the microphone in the back, so everyone can hear you clearly. So Imam Ibrahim, go ahead if you can speak into the microphone, really loud.
Since I believe you're the leader of the American Muslims for Palestine, and I'm asking is there any efforts, any initiatives that you guys are working with the education system, districts and universities and colleges regarding having a curriculum delivering our narrative about Palestine?
No.
I just noticed that there is a curriculum talking about quote-unquote Israeli and Arab conflict.
Yeah.
And your social studies in the school system. And this is something very huge. If you want to have an impact, then
Yeah.
there's something has to be with that.
We've been trying to work on developing a curriculum. I don't want to say that we made a major headway, but it is one of the items that's on our list to do. And we continue to try to build that. But on the other hand, we put some of our focus right now in creating a C4, which is a lobbying arm or a lobbying division for AMP. And we're literally in the middle of finalizing the paperwork. So because as a C3, you're limited in terms of what you could do on the political front. A C4 allows you to do so. So that the educational part, I would say, has been taken a back track for right now on developing the curriculum while we're building the C4.
That's something beneficial for the parents to go and speak out, or to wait until we have something that we can work on?
No, I advocate for people to speak out if they see something that's wrong and does not represent them. The squeaky wheel will get the attention. If you don't squeak, then your wheel is going to continue to be broken. Right? So I encourage parents, if you see something that is misrepresenting the Palestinians, the Muslims, the Arab population, and so to actually go and complain. And right now I work on both the rising tide of the Hindutva in the US and also the rising partnership with the Zionists. And they're partnering in impacting curriculum in Illinois, in California, and other places. So I think we need to be aware of those relationships and continue to speak. Silence will not change anything. So I encourage people to speak, and the parents as well.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thanks for your in-depth presentation on Palestine. You touched upon Islamophobia.
Yes.
And also the data. What do you do with the data? Secondly, have you actually set up some sort of a mechanism to fight back Islamophobia?
Well, we have a full center, right? So we have a full center that is dedicated to the work on Islamophobia. We have an academic journal, the only academic journal in the world on Islamophobia. We have almost over 200 scholars working on the field of Islamophobia. We have people in Russia writing on Islamophobia, in Japan, in most of the Asian countries, most of Europe. So we've been doing deliberately all the work on Islamophobia. We published a whole report on Islamophobia in India, stoking bigotry, one of the first full publication to deal with what is taking place in India. Followed it again with another report on India and COVID-19 and how they targeted Muslims. I went and visited India myself down in Kerala in the south to see and to talk with people to understand what's going on. The data we collect, we try to put out on a monthly basis the data of how it looks like. We try to put reports to put to policymakers and to effect how Islamophobia is seen and documented. So in essence, for me, data drives policy. If you don't have data, you can't actually make impact on policy.
I agree with you. some respect that it has to be done, from the up to down. But I believe there's something has to be done grassroots level.
Well, that's what we're asking people to
Yeah.
download the app.
Right.
I want you to download the app. I want you to file, to give us your, what happened to you. If somebody on the job, I know somebody was driving me, say that, their colleagues stopped bombing, or why you're still bombing, or why. That's an Islamophobic statement, right? Can you imagine your white colleague says, why don't you stop, mass murders? Because it seems that every day we have a mass shooter, and most of mass shooters in the United States happen to be white men, right? But we don't think about it this way. So if it's a Muslim, it's immediately say, stop bombing, right? So that's an Islamophobic incident. You're going to the Czechos, go back home, I'm not going to attend to you. That's an Islamophobic incident.
Don't you think there should be some sort of a little booklet to teach, people on the grassroots level, so they know how to communicate to their neighbor, their colleague, their fellow student?
Yeah, that's not my, at least for me, maybe some on the local level can put what you call a manual, but you can't put on us as academic, working on data, design, on service and so on, for us to go down to the level of being in every mosque. There's only one of us, two people in the center, and there's about 2,200 mosques. Right? So again, I think some things that you guys have to do for yourself in here, we have some tools. We could provide you some tools and some information, but some initiatives at the local level need to take place.
Thank you.
Jazakallah for the questions, and then we're going to go back to the questions here on the paper. This one asks, how does the Abdul Wahab Masli argument that transference is genocide apply?
What is it?
How does Abdul Wahab Masri argument that says that transference is genocide apply? Brothers, whoever asked this question, if you can...
Transference means genocide?
Do we have the brother that asked this question? Oh, okay.
Yes, assalamu alaikum. I asked that question. Abdul Wahab al-Masiri, the Egyptian thinker.
Oh, okay.
I learned this from him when he argued that transference is genocide. That when you forcibly translate
Oh yeah, transferring a population.
And transferring a population.
Yeah, it is. Genocide has to, either you commit people to genocide, which is actually killing them, or transferring them, which is a form of genocide, because you eliminate their relationship to the land, their culture, their heritage.
Exactly. So can we use that argument, because it's academically proven, right, with the American Indians, with the Africans that were brought here.
And there's a convention on genocide.
Exactly.
Oh, for sure.
And make the argument in the general population, when you're forcibly transferring the Palestinians, it's a form of genocide.
No, absolutely.
Because the word genocide is a lightning rod.
Yeah.
And it's been...
Well, genocide is a lightning rod. Apartheid is a lightning rod.
Yeah.
Settler colonialism, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there some effort to try to link Israeli policy to genocide?
Yes, and that's why I'm speaking about it, because I'm trying to frame it as settler colonialism and genocide.
Okay. Thank you, inshallah.
You're welcome.
And then we have a brother in the back. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Professor.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I just had a question regarding the Balfour Declaration that you mentioned towards the beginning of your slideshow.
Yeah.
You had shown us the text of the Balfour Declaration and the 68 words that completely changed the course of the Holy Land and the area that surrounded it. We saw from your explanation and with the slides that you presented that this entire thing is legally invalid, because to first transfer something, you have to have possession of the object. Like, if I put my phone on the table over there, I couldn't give it to you because I don't have it in my hand, as an example. So I assume that as a professor, mashallah, you've done a couple of discourses regarding this sort of topic. So what sort of refutations do you get when you bring up the topic that the Balfour Declaration is legally invalid, therefore this entire occupation is legally invalid?
Well, you get what you call, we're right now are beyond the Balfour Declarations, the state is there. So, yes, it's difficult, but we need to move on. So basically, let's deal with the reality of today.
So basically, they're building a house without a basement.
Well, yeah, basically.
Okay, Jazakallah
Yeah.
khair.
So the fact that is what you call is erroneous is the same way that colonization, we're coming to civilize you, but we need to kill you to civilize you. Right? It's erroneous. Like every place where colonization went, they said that we're going to civilize, right, the barbarians or the populations in Africa, in Asia, and so on. But every place they went, they actually killed people, genocide, and made it worse for the people. Africa had far more educated people than before colonization than after. Their own records, their own references. When they went to West Africa, they actually enumerated the number of Quranic schools that were in West Africa. They said that there are far more people able to read and write than what you find in European countryside during the colonial period. But what they projected, in order for you to colonize and dispossess people, you need to make them subhuman. And you need to actually reduce them to being unable to be equal to you. And once you do that, then you take their property, you take their land, and you systematically eliminate them. And that's what's taken place.
Jazakallah. And now I actually have a question that I thought of while you were speaking earlier.
Okay.
You mentioned that we want to implement some sort of narrative that supports Palestine and actually gives a fair view on this entire issue. So as a student myself, I wanted to ask you, what can students do, like students like myself in high school, in college, do to be more proactive about this entire issue?
Okay. Well, if you're in college, join the SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, right? It's an organization I started in 1992 at Berkeley, and now it's all over the country. So make sure to join SJP and work. If you're an MSA, work with the MSA to actually be organized and engaged in the question of Palestine. So those are important for you to do. Second, if you're in a college that does not have courses or presentation on Palestine, make sure that you have presentation and information on Palestine. You could organize a group to go and visit Palestine and visit with the Palestinians as part of what you call your academic program. In Berkeley, the law students have created a program where they take law students to visit Palestine, and they raise funds to take the group of students and to look and examine what is taking place. So there's different ways that you are effective. If you're a writer, write a blog, put out your information. I know that some of our youth are very skilled with their technology. Yes, you have your TikTok about your what you're eating in the morning, but actually make and use TikTok to put some effective messages relative to Palestine, and they have an impact. I think the Al-Kurd family, both Muhammad and Mun Al-Kurd, have been so effective in using social media and technology to get this. So there's some things that you could do in order for you to actually project the Palestinian narrative and the Palestinian case at a tool that is at your own disposal.
Jazakallah. And that actually will conclude our Q&A
Thank you.
session. So again, if please join me in thanking Professor Hatem.
Thank you. Thank you.
So brothers and sisters, Jazakallah again for joining us all on this very somber topic, but one that is very, very important to us in modern history and history itself. Now I just would like to convey two messages. One, that we have tea and dessert in the cafeteria, and all the kids that you've been waiting to be reunited with will be there inshallah. And two, to keep staying involved, and like Professor Hatem said, download the app, do what you can do, stay vocal and empowered by the knowledge. And inshallah, we'll have Isha prayer soon.
Thank you.
Can we give
Thank
a
you.
hand to Sister Aisha for this great work?
Nice.